Hello and welcome to the 6-week breath workshop. We're going to take a deep dive into the breath in 6 different sessions here. My name is Vicki Sullivan. I'm very happy to be here presenting this to you. My background is that I have a background in exercise physiology. I did my master's in exercise physiology. I'm also a dietitian. And I have a doctorate in nutritional sciences. And so in the last 25, 30 years, I've also been exploring the breath with different types of movement techniques, mainly Pilates, also gyrotonic, Qigong, lots and lots of different ways. Studied a little bit of Kundalini that people teach breath and movement. And I have found that while I've always been drawn to movement techniques that include focusing on the breath, I really had no idea how little I was utilizing it until, to be honest, 2020. I think a lot of us had some transformational changes in 2020. When I started to read some very specific books, one of them was Breathe by James Nestor. That kind of transformed my whole thought process. Breathe in, breathe out, a whole bunch of different books on different techniques that I just started diving into. Then in the last 2 years, have been to several breath courses, 2 breath retreats that were educational retreats. And I've found that I had collected enough information that now I feel comfortable with just giving you the tip of the iceberg. And that's what we're going to do in this 6-week course. We're going to start from the beginning, and I'm going to try to give you a format that you could use. It's more like a tasting, right? I'm not endorsing or actually presenting one specific type of breath. I think what I've learned and what I've always believed, there's many different ways to do things. There's not necessarily one that's perfect. Nobody's 100% wrong, especially on breath. And so what we're going to do is really just take sort of a smorgasbord view of different techniques that are very popular and have sort of, let's just say, lasted the test of time. Okay, so let me just start with my screen share because I want to share my presentation with you. I think what I'll do is we'll go into, bear with me for 1 second. I think what I'll do is go into my play from the start, and we're just going to do a full screen view. So, welcome to Breathe and Breath. So, the first thing I want to talk about is this very important muscle, probably arguably the most important muscle in your body, and that's the diaphragm. It sits right, if you take your fingers and you just kind of fold yourself forward, right up under those ribs. It comes all the way back to the back of your rib cage, right? And it's like an umbrella. It's also a muscle that's very, let's just say, underutilized by most of us. We contract the diaphragm on average 50,000 times per day, 25,000 breaths per day, but that is also not very efficient. Most of us are not efficient breathers, at least in this culture, like in sort of the modernized world. I studied the diaphragm, or I studied with someone at University of Florida, Scott Powers, and the Department of Health and Human Performance, who really took, again, a very strong interest in the physiology and the biochemistry of the diaphragm. Now, at the time, we were looking at muscle biochemistry, so it wasn't necessarily, practical breathing that we were looking at. We were looking at how the diaphragm changes in exercise and aging and things like that. But he was so passionate about the diaphragm that he argued that it was clearly the most important muscle in the body, more important than even the heart, because without the diaphragm, you have no heart, right? And vice versa. They definitely play a pretty equal role in being critical, don't they, to life? Um, it also works very closely, if you're talking about exercise, with the inner unit of your body. It's part of your deep inner cylinder of the core. So when we talk about that, the pelvic floor, the diaphragm, okay, and also when we're talking about these muscles low, deep in the body, this is the transversus abdominis, very close to your organs. It kind of hugs your organs and keeps you you safe in that respect. And also the back, the multifidi, these little tiny muscles in the back. So we live in a cylinder, and the diaphragm is the top of the cylinder, and the pelvic floor is the bottom of the cylinder. You cannot have good core control without this muscle. So the breath has to be part of good core centering exercise, right? And if you think about what it does, it also regulates the breath, regulates the heart rate, right? It regulates the blood pressure and your mere existence. So looking at the diaphragm is and its importance, what happens if the diaphragm stops working? We're done, right? So this is a very important muscle, not just all to itself, but think about some other things. How our posture has changed and how people's posture might affect the diaphragm, because it certainly does. So if you think about a lot of people, their posture, let's just take a specific posture, is very, very forward, maybe sitting behind desks looking at phones and curled over. So that means the diaphragm is compressed and cannot take a full breath. The belly is pushed up into the diaphragm and we can't breathe. So I want you to just take your hands, okay? And I want you to just take your hands and turn them down like 2 cups. And then turn them the other way. And we're going to we're just going to kind of mimic what happens when you breathe. So when you breathe, we inhale, turn your palms up. The diaphragm drops down into this abdominal cavity. The pelvic floor pushes down too, because we're filling that abdominal cavity with air, right? And the lungs, and we fill up like a balloon. When we exhale, the diaphragm stretches or relaxes. I say stretches because I believe stretching is as important as contracting. And that's true for any muscle in your body. So when we inhale, the diaphragm contracts and the pelvic floor relaxes a bit, but it can still be engaged, by the way. When we exhale, the diaphragm relaxes, the pelvic floor doesn't always do this, relax, or I'm sorry, contract and lift. Lift to kind of create this pump, right? So there is intra-abdominal pressure here, and it is working like a compression pump, right? I'm exaggerating it. When we breathe, all right? So you can imagine that posture, stress when we breathe shallowly, disease, and fitness all affect how fit are you? The diaphragm. Now, why should you focus on better breathing? This has been a big question. I think a lot of people think, I'm probably fine. I breathe fine. I breathe all the time. Why do I need instructions on how to breathe? I have found this very specifically from all of my work, and it wasn't necessarily something I was looking for, but I can tell you one of the things I've experienced is better memory and more focus since I've been practicing very simple breath techniques. Okay. So that's a good reason. Most of us would say. Certainly emotional health, staying calm in the storm. That's another thing I've experienced is being able to not become emotionally attached to things that maybe I used to become emotionally attached to, a lot more awareness of how stress or conflict situations affect not just my breathing, but my heart rate, my blood pressure, my reaction, and how those things, my heart rate, my blood pressure, and my breath, are directly tied to my reactions. So emotional health, anxiety is one of the most important reasons that I think focusing on better breathing can benefit all of us, right? Better sleep quality. We're going to talk about whether you're a mouth breather or a nose breather. And most people have no idea because when you're asleep, how do you know? Maybe your partner knows better than you and has let you know. Most people are mouth breathers, and that will affect the quality of your sleep tremendously. So closing our mouths, making sure, how do we do that? We're going to talk about mouth taping, has become a kind of a popular topic. And there's many different ways to do it. There's not just one. So we're going to talk about some of the different ways to do that today. Improving athletic performance. This has always been something that has been around, but strangely, while I studied breath from a completely different angle in exercise physiology, this was not a topic that we really looked at in graduate school in exercise physiology. We studied more of the physiology of the muscles and the, biochemistry. But there is no doubt that breath techniques improve athletic performance. And I work with a lot of different athletes, and it's very rare that I have somebody come in who has practiced breath work. So I think it's just fascinating. And I think also the possibilities of what we can do with this going forward are amazing. So that's going to be fun to dive into. Also, just relaxation and realization that this mind and this body are not two separate entities. So just for the very important health benefit of learning how to activate the parasympathetic, that's the rest and relax and restore and digest, as opposed to the sympathetic, fight, flight, let's go. And sometimes we need fight, flight, and there is breath techniques for that too. But many times what we have probably more difficulty with is turning off that response, right? When we don't need it. And we don't need it in this day and age as much as we might have when there was a saber-toothed tiger chasing us, right? So knowing how to control those things. And listen, it's amazing what you can control with just this breath. And you've got it with you all the time, right? So better quality, better command of breath has been proven to enhance all of these things. It's very well known, but it's not very well. It's known, but it's not. It's just, I think in the last couple of years now, it's finally becoming recognized. So when you're looking at the science of breath, this is an important topic that has also been very misunderstood, I think. One of the things I'll say is, I think there's been this misunderstanding that more oxygen is better. If I can take in more oxygen breathing, if I'm breathing more, That's better. Nothing could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, most people breathe entirely too much. So why and what does that mean? Let's talk about the physiology a little bit, okay? So when we inhale, we do take in oxygen, right, from the air. The air travels into the lungs, gets transferred into the bloodstream, heads for the tissues and muscles. This is carried by hemoglobin in the blood, right? CO2 is a byproduct. CO2 is formed as a byproduct of metabolism. When you eat, you metabolize food. Different things actually produce CO2 as a end product, right? That is also transported into the bloodstream to the lungs and removed through exhalation, right? Here's an interesting point. And this is one that a lot of people don't know. When we burn fat through exercise, right, through just everyday, needs, the end product of burning fat is CO2 and water. And it is exhaled, CO2 from burning fat is exhaled through your lungs. If you ask health professionals that question, most of them are not aware of that, which is very interesting. Why do we want less breathing? And why do we want more of this end product, CO2? Because listen, that's what we need more of floating around in the system. Because CO2 increases the acidity of the blood. If it hangs around, if you're hyperventilating and you're blowing it off, it's not there. When there's more acidity in the blood, it is the key that unlocks oxygen from hemoglobin. So oxygen and hemoglobin are floating around in the blood, but they're not going to be unloaded unless the pH of the blood reaches a certain point that there is a trigger for that oxygen to be used, right? The tissues are now over here and it's like ding, ding, ding. Acidity is the trigger, which happens when CO2 increases. And so it is the key that unlocks the lock between hemoglobin and oxygen and allows the oxygen to be delivered to your tissues. So interestingly enough, if we breathe less breaths per minute, let's just say, and we breathe slow, and our exhales are longer, this is the key to having more oxygen released into our tissues. So there's a lot of research on this. How many breaths do you take per minute? And this is a good question. Okay, let me just get back here. Probably way too many. The average for most people is about 15 to 16 breaths per minute. We are aiming for 6 to 10. But people who are really efficient, some of the people who practice breathing and are very, very efficient might be down to even 4 or 5 breaths per minute. So that's really a very calm state, right? And it's also a very efficient state for utilizing oxygen in your body. So let's go ahead and do a quick little test here. I'm going to set a timer for you, and you're going to record. Let's do, let's see how many breaths you take per minute. So I just want you to breathe normally and don't cheat. This is a beginning. It's always good to assess the befores and the afters, right? And we're gonna start with just seeing where we are, right? So Just go ahead and inhale. If you can, and exhale through the nose. If you can't, it's okay, but just inhale through the nose, right? So let's go ahead and just take a breath in and a breath out. And then I want you to start. Just count your breaths. I'm going to have you stop, pause, and that's 30 seconds. Okay. So I want you to times two. Whatever your number was, multiply it by two. And then we're going to do it again. Okay. Take a nice breath in, exhale, and let's start again. Go ahead and start inhaling, counting your breaths. So that was a minute. And this is something that we're going to work on sort of just as like one of our markers, right? One of the things that we're going to mark and kind of work out on this course. So, are you a nose breather or a mouth breather? Well, one way to find out at night is if somebody else tells you. But the other way is to consider mouth taping. Okay. So, mouth taping is something that you're going to have to think about what are some different ways that we could do that. So, I'm going to grab my tape, which I forgot to bring out here, but hold on for 1 second. Okay, I'm back. There's a few different ways that you can do this, all right? So this is just surgical tape. It's the paper surgical tape, which is a lot easier and softer um, than some of the other types of tape out there. It's also a lot more invasive. And I'm just going to refer back to James Nestor again, because James Nestor spent a lot of time researching this. And he looked at all the different ways that people have done this. And some of them were really extreme, like duct taping your mouth, which I think is extreme too, because it makes people very, very uncomfortable. I asked one of my clients yesterday if she taped her mouth, and she said no. And I said, have you considered it? She goes, no, I'm afraid I'm going to suffocate. So very, very common and not really an unreasonable thing to think. This is what Nestor came up with as the simplest and most non-invasive way to tape your mouth, okay? And he actually taught us this at both of his retreats. Um, it's just maybe a little bit bigger than a stamp, okay? And then you're just gonna put the tape right at the top of your lips, close your lips. I can't talk and do this like that. I will tell you, if you use face cream, you're going to remove it before you put this on because it won't stay on. So, or put your face cream on after you do this, right? Because it'll annoy the daylights out of you, and you won't be able to keep it on. Same thing is true. So maybe just take a little something and go around the outside of your lips, right? For myotape. Now, myotape, this is a type of tape that was, um, it was actually developed specifically by Patrick McNown. He's a guy from Ireland. He's really, really great guy. I have a little picture of him on there, actually, who I also went and did a workshop with. And he is the kind of, he works on a lot of different things, performance types of breathing for athletes. He also works on anxiety a lot, asthma, but he is a breathe less guy. And he really explains the science well. And he did a lot for people with sleep, to try to make this a little less invasive, especially if you're talking about children or people that you really wouldn't want to tape their mouth completely shut. So this is the way it looks. It goes on like this, right around your lips. It's very, very sexy and attractive. And that's myotape. So with myotape, by the way, you can see that I can still open my mouth if I had to yell or anything else. But what it does is it closes my lips, and it actually works, fairly well. It's good at just kind of reminding you to shut your mouth, right? And it's non-invasive, and so those are both very non-invasive techniques. Some people are completely comfortable, and Patrick recommends this if you're not going to use the myotape, with taking the tape, and this is just surgical tape again. It's not anything crazy, and closing your mouth and doing all the way across your lips, right? It comes off easily. Like if you really had to get this off, you're not going to be like in a hostage situation, right? So it does come off easily, and it's not. I think it's non-invasive. You pick which method you like better, right? And also what works for you, because a lot of people, I'm going to tell you, they can still. This might work, but they might still be exhaling through their mouth. Um, We are trying to inhale and exhale through our nose. Why? So many reasons. All right. This is a filter. The nose is a filter. It's a filter for microbes, bacteria, viruses. Nestor said this, at both of his workshops, and I also have had this experience since I've started truly focusing on breathing through my nose. I no longer get sick. I mean, if I start to get sick, like I have, a virus coming on or a cold, I do very specific breath techniques. We're going to talk about the Wim Hof method. We're going to talk about Patrick McNown's Breathe Light method. And I practice them maybe for a couple of days. And I have been able to ward off, I'm not kidding, some colds and viruses. So far, so good. I also feel like my immune system is improved by this. And I think that Patrick McNown says that's the next piece that they haven't even really tapped into yet. But it makes sense just from the standpoint that you are exposing this body to less of what's out there in the environment because of this very, very important filter. Animals breathe through their nose. Dogs might open their mouth to, because when they're hot, because this is their way of sweating, right? But horses, look at race horses. They don't breathe through their mouth. Some of the fastest animals in the world, like the cheetah, they breathe through their nose. So it's not really meant to the mouth to be used for breathing. People who have severe breath diseases often breathe through the mouth, like severe asthma or some of the different things that are lung diseases. And that is a result of actually not having good diaphragmatic and nasal breathing because of, for different reasons, for other reasons, right? And lung capacity. Even if you have sinus and allergy issues, you might say, well, I can't breathe through my nose. You will start to learn to breathe through your nose better, and you will start to have less of them. And that is what it will do for sinus and allergy issues. So be gentle on yourself, take it slow, but close your mouth. This is another really interesting point that there is actually some science on. And that is humming. Two things. Breathing through your nose increases this very important substance called nitric oxide. There's a lot of things we don't even know about nitric oxide. It's a very mysterious one, but we know that it does a lot of really good things. And one of the really good things it does is vasodilation. One of my clients said, what does that mean? What is that? What is the point of vasodilation? And I explained the drug Viagra works by vasodilation, and they understood exactly what it was. But it does, and that's what Viagra is. It's nitric oxide. It's a vasodilator. So this vasodilator, okay, the nose and humming, increases that particular chemical substance in your whole system. Vasodilation opens up the vessels and makes you more efficient at transporting and utilizing these gases. Okay, so it's a really good thing, just simply by breathing through your nose. Okay, breathing through your nose will trigger your parasympathetic. Just remember, it's the opposite of fight or flight, and you will stay calmer throughout your day instead of being in the fight or flight all the time. This is really important for people who have anxiety and panic. And there are some exercises that we're going to do just that are very, very simple for decreasing anxiety and even for panic attacks, right? And they're not difficult. They're really, really simple. So these are some simple things that you can do and some immediate things that you can do right away. And most of what I'm going to be talking about today, you don't necessarily have to set aside a specific time for. Isn't that the good news? Patrick really drives that point home, that you can do these during your normal daily activities, okay? Even driving your car, you can do breath work, okay? Which we wouldn't say about things like meditation, maybe, but you can. So biomechanics, what else is important about good breath quality? And this is a very simple way to look at it, but standing, when you're standing, is your head centered over your shoulders? This is a simple version. Are your shoulders right over your rib basket? This is a basket, not a cage, by the way. Is your rib basket centered over your pelvis? Okay. And then is your pelvis centered over your ankles? Not really your toes, but it's just head, shoulders, pelvis, toes, head and shoulders, knees and toes. Remember that little? So that's one way that you could remember it, okay? But Another thing that I like to think about is, okay, well, that's in standing, but we're sitting a lot, aren't we? And so in a seated position, what is a good seated position? So a good seated position is I have my natural curves, okay? Remember we talked about how this compresses your diaphragm and you can't breathe as well. You can't breathe into your diaphragm in your belly. Sitting up tall in a neutral pelvis, which means I have these natural soft curves in my spine. I have a rounder, here's my curves. The neck has a natural curve, okay? The lumbar spine has a natural curve, but so does the thoracic spine, my upper back, in the other direction. And so does my sacrum down here. It's like a wave, right? And those curves become very important. So if you're sitting on your sitting bones, I never sit in a chair like this. I really, if you catch me doing it, I want you to tell me, because I'm always trying to train myself. The reason I do is because I had severe back pain before I met Pilates, and I don't have it anymore at all. And that has a lot to do with it, is I sit with good seated posture. And I'm telling you, you'll be surprised at how much that takes care of things like chronic back pain. But the other thing that we're doing here is I'm allowing this posture, this neutral, this ideal posture I'm allowing my diaphragm to be able to fully breathe, to really fill my belly, my diaphragm, right? Chest is the very last part of it, and my lungs with air in a way that's ideal. Okay. I like this idea of the domes. So we the diaphragm being the biggest and most important dome in your body, right? But these domes in our body, I'm gonna push this away a little bit so you can just see me a little bit better. These domes in my body are, I'm going to go down, the crown of the head, the roof of your mouth. So the back of the crown of your head is a dome. The roof of your mouth is a dome. That tongue should rest on the top of the roof of the mouth. This little point right here is called the manubrium. That is this little point in at the top of your sternum. I think of this as another dome point is the throat. The diaphragm is the biggest dome in your body. The pelvic floor, I'm going to step up here so you can see me better, is also a dome, right? The pelvic floor. And then the soles of your feet, the center arches of your feet, are another dome, okay? So if I were going to be lined up with all these domes, I'm going to step away from you a little bit, then these domes would all be lined up. That, oh, and the knees too. The knees, my knees are lined up. Stand up if you're with me here, and you can, over the center of the arches of my feet. The sockets of my pelvis would be lined up over the knees and the center of my feet, right? The arches. The pelvic floor, let's move to the middle ground, would be lined up, pelvis over feet, right? Centered. And it's again in the center of those two domes of your feet. Diaphragm lines up over pelvis, another dome, right? Throat over diaphragm. Roof of mouth over throat. Crown of head, back of crown of head, towards the back, over roof of mouth. So if I was maybe these chimes that maybe you can hear them outside, and I was just these series of domes that are hanging, right? They would be fluid. They would be moving domes. They're not static. but I'm trying to line them up in whatever I'm doing, whether it's standing or whether it's sitting, right? Even you could think about it in any position, right? And that's the beauty of the domes. If I were laying down, right? Any position, those domes are your center. So that's a nice way to find our center. And it's really important. So posture is really important to your breath. Okay. So we're going to take our tongue and we're going to put it on the roof of our mouth, because the other thing that's really important to your breath is where your tongue is. And these little exercises are also quite good for, we don't ever exercise the muscles of our face. So believe it or not, people used to do this exercise to try to get better cheekbones in myofascial types of different reasons, but hey, it's another benefit, right? So tip of tongue is going to be 3 centimeters behind the front teeth. Not pushing on the front teeth, by the way, but behind them. Okay. Back of tongue, find the soft palate of your mouth. Swallow, it's an easy way to find it. And push your tongue up to the roof of your mouth. And we're going to do swallow for 30 seconds. Okay, so let's try it. I want you to just go ahead and swallow, just open your mouth and find that. Now, put that tongue on the roof of the mouth. Here we go, start swallowing. Really pushing that tongue to the roof of the mouth. And we are there. So do that. This is going to be your homework. 3 times per day. So 1 time per day. And that will, if you plan for 3, you'll maybe do it 1, right? And that is a very simple thing you can do, because the tongue gets in the way of your windpipe, right? Of your breath. And you will start to increase the space behind your throat. You will start to increase that space where you actually can get better breath. So this sounds like something maybe you've never thought about even, but these exercises are very, very important to better utilization of, there is a role for your mouth now, right? Of the breath. This one is also one that is an oral exercise for better breath. It's called cheek puffing, right? So we're going to puff air into your right cheek. Hold for 5 seconds. Puff that air into your left cheek. Puff that air into your upper lips. Puff that air into your lower lips. Do that while you're driving. I do that while I'm driving. I look over at somebody, they think I'm completely mad. I don't care. But it's a great place to do it. Do it while you're in the shower. Find a place. This is what I mean. You don't have to just set aside a time to do this. You can do this while you're walking. You could do this before you go to bed, right? It doesn't matter. Just do it. I have a couple of breath techniques that I'm going to give you. This is a great one for when you're frustrated, when you're stuck in traffic, when you're mad at somebody and you're going to let them have it, but you shouldn't. You should take a reset and step back. But you don't have time, you say? Yes, you do. Even if you just take 1 deep breath in, you have time for a sigh, right? This is an exaggerated sigh, okay? To calm the mind, to calm the emotions, to bring yourself into a state of, let's just say you need to wake up. You're going into a meeting. You need to wake up. This will wake you up. All right. So it's a great breath for bringing you up and also leveling you out. And here's what we're going to do. 3 breaths through the nose until the lungs are full. So it looks like this. Fill up the balloon. Hold for 10. Squeeze everything in your body. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale slowly. Ideally through the nose, but it doesn't have to be. All right. It could be through the mouth. Inhale through the nose 3 times. Squeeze everything. Everything is contracted for 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, your feet, your hands, your whole body. Release it. Do that 5 times, 4 to 6, sometime during your day. Maybe you'll do it 3 times this week. That's your homework. Coherent breathing is a very researched breath. It's very interesting that most of the mantras that we are kind of used to, whether it be from religions, Christian, Buddhist, it doesn't really matter. If you really measure the amount of time that people spend even on Om, it's about 5.5 seconds. Inhale and about 5.5 seconds exhale. Very interesting. So there's been a lot of research on coherent breathing. What does coherent breathing do? It slows and stabilizes the nervous system and the heart, and gets the breath and the heart and the nervous system to kind of all be coherent, on the same page. Mentally calms the mind, the body through the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is responsible for relaxing the muscles, decreasing the sense of stress. So breath work does that in general. This is just a really nice one that's not that complicated that I welcome you to do anytime. So it's simply, I'm going to set a timer for a quick second. Okay. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. And you can set a timer. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that was in that range of 5 to 10, and it was 1 minute. It takes very little time to do this. That's the beauty of it. These are the types of things that have probably helped me the most, and they're simple. We're going to get into some more complicated things as we go, but for now, I'm going to ask you to practice these simple things this week on your own. You don't have to take any special extra time to do it. Isn't that great in your busy day? Tongue on the roof of the mouth, swallow, and cheek puffing. Try to just do it every day. Violoma pranayama, 3 times, 3 days this week. That's the one where we inhale, 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 hold for 10 seconds and exhale. Okay. Coherent breath whenever possible, at least 1 time per day. I want you to remember to do it. Breathe through your nose. If you have to mouth breathe, it's okay. Do not beat yourself up about it. just start getting used to using this very important tool for what it was designed for, the nose. If you will, play with different types of mouth tape and see what you think. That was one of the most profound things I did. And I never would have dreamed that I would be taping my mouth, but I do it now. Has helped my sleep tremendously. Breathe through your nose, observe your breath, see if you're doing that. Thank you so much for coming today. I hope to see you next week. We will pick up with 5 more sessions on many different topics. Stay tuned and see you next week.